Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm gonna start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, the Bootsy Greencast, because my mom just hated it. So we named the show that just to mess with her a little bit because she has to listen to every show, because I stand there and basically listen to her, I watch her listen to the show. It gets weird. But we're going to go and talk about some really cool stuff today. I want to shout out to my friends at Content Safe for distributing this all over all the different internet platforms. And I also want to plug really quickly the Magic on the Mountain with the Grimerica guys. I'm going to be in Arizona February 13th, 2022. That whole weekend, we are going to be doing some really cool stuff with Joe Roop and Brandon Powell, breathwork and magic manifestation. We'll be talking about transurfing and quantum physics and that kind of stuff. Really looking forward to that. Check that out. I'll have a link in the description. And today, folks, I'm super excited to have somebody who's different and has a lot of really cool talents and skills. Really, we're going to dig into some cool stuff here. So I'm really excited to have Phil Strazzulla on the show today. Phil, thank you so much for being a part of my little podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I think my mom's going to love you, by the way.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's a really nice Southern woman, and hopefully my Northern charm won't be too much of a turn on.
She's very accepting, for sure. And you actually nailed it. Like that total meme of the like the apron that's like, checkered apron and the biscuits, everything. You pretty much nailed it. But you've got quite an extensive background, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about investment and business, and you have quite a pedigree, I'd say, and then quite a lot of experience in that realm, and that's really exciting, especially for somebody like me, because I come here to learn, and I come here really to talk about what other people are passionate about and just expand, hopefully my mind and the listener's mind to some other ideas, perspectives of the world, etc. And I'm really excited to talk to you because like I said, I'm kind of a blue collar entrepreneur, and as far as business goes, I have some experience, but I'm excited to chat and learn more because it seems like it's something that you've been very passionate about from a young age.
I'm excited to learn as well about what transurfing is and all the stuff that you mentioned. I was like, man, like what is this? Is some next level stuff right here that I don't even know about. So I really want to hear about that. But I guess I've always been interested for whatever reason in business stuff. My parents moved a few years ago, and I was helping them move stuff, and I found this exercise that you have to do in like 5th grade where it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd written down, I want to get my MBA at a really good college like Harvard and be the CEO of a technology company. So for whatever reason, even though I did, play soccer and hockey and like do like normal stuff, like I have always been interested in business. And as we were chatting about before the call, like I've even been investing in the stock market since I was a little kid. So,
man, that is so cool. See, I know nothing about the stock market. Stock market scares the crap out of me. I've never invested in the stock market. I've messed with the crypto stuff a little bit, just to play around with it. But all that kind of stuff, it just, it just seems so complicated and difficult to understand. How did you begin to sort of learn about it and wrap your mind around it?
It is a little bit scary. So I was in 4th and 5th grade when the dot-com bubble kind of kicked off, like 1995, Netscape went public, and that started this thing that lasted till March of 2000. And so there was always just a lot of buzz around like this IPO or this money thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'd always been interested in money, and for whatever reason, I opened up a bank account when I was in 1st grade. And I remember my parents were like, hey, like for every $100 you're able to save, the bank will just give you $5 for free every single year. And because the interest rate was 5% back then.
In the old days.
Back in the days, yeah. Now it's like, 1 penny. Like they send you that like tax document from your Bank of America checking statement, and like it's like you owe like no dollars because you made like literally a penny in interest over the past year. But anyway, so I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like if you have money, like money just like starts to come to you as well. And with all the IPO stuff going on, like I started like asking, parents and friends in the neighborhood who were older, like, oh, like, this stock, like Intel, like you put money into it and then it went up and you made money. Like I'm over here mowing lawns for $10 a lawn sort of thing. And I could have made $100 yesterday if I just had 1 share of Intel. So that seemed like a better way to do things. Mm-hmm. And my brother and I kind of begged our parents for a couple of years actually to open up brokerage accounts. And eventually they said yes. And we would just read like Worth magazine and like look at the stock picks from the analysts in there. And we would like pick one here, pick one there. And we were really lucky. We listened to Warren Buffett in like 1999 to get out of the market. And we picked some of the better stocks for mostly random reasons. And eventually you kind of just get like more and more comfortable with this stuff. And I think when you're a kid, you can learn so much faster. Like think about people that learn languages as a kid or learn sports as a kid. You're just always going to learn stuff faster. And so probably some of that stuff that I learned before I hit puberty, like helped me later in life to understand things at a slightly deeper level.
Man, that is so cool. Yeah, I love that story. I love how, and it's got to be fortunate too to be listening to Warren Buffett at the critical moments and stuff too. But it makes sense, once you get involved in something and you kind of get your feet in the water, you start to, get more and more comfortable and maybe have some insight and even some intuition into what the markets are going to do. I'd say, is that true?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, look, the stock market's insane, right? Like it goes up, it goes down. Tesla's at 200, it's at 1,000. It's all over the place, and there's just so many different factors that go into this stuff. And as an individual person, my philosophy is you really can't beat the market. Like you really shouldn't own stocks. You should own a large basket of stocks through a low-cost ETF, like through Betterment or something like that. And just like put money in it every week. And over the course of 20 or 30 years, it'll grow and grow and grow, and don't worry about it. And that's sort of my take on the individual stock market. And then I was really lucky, like 15 or so years ago, a friend of mine did this deal where we bought part of a building in the Bronx. This guy who owned like half this building, pretty big building, he got audited by the IRS, and the IRS is like, hey, you owe us $7 million. You have to pay us like ASAP or you're going to jail. And so he needed money really fast. And somehow my buddy, because we were living in New York, like found out about this and like raised the money. And, I gave him like $1,000 or whatever it was. But that was sort of my first foray into like these like specialized situations or like private investing where you're not competing against every single person in the universe. You're finding these like really weird things that happen every year or 2 or 3 where you can put money into stuff and pretty safely make a good return. And so that's what I do mostly now, is these sort of like weird things, because the stock market is, everybody in the world with a Robinhood app is in the stock market. And so what's your edge there, I guess. But finding these like proprietary deals where maybe you can only be an investor if you can add value to the deal itself that's a much better strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. In crypto, I have a friend, I don't do a whole lot, so I'm not obviously not an expert anyway, but they say that you want volatility, like, as scary as that is, right? You want to pay 10 cents for, I guess, a shit coin or whatever. And then it goes, up through the roof to like 16 cents, like,
Yeah.
to like, you can make thousands of dollars that way. But I mean, it seems like
you can also make thousands of dollars playing roulette. But eventually, if you stay at that table long enough, you're going to lose your money. And I think that there are certain players in the crypto ecosystem who are the house, and they're the ones that are going to make all the money. And it's hard for most people to understand all these things. And you see Doge, you see like some like random thing or something like 0.01 cents to 1 cent. And you're like, oh, my buddy made $400 off that thing. I'm going to invest in all these other things. Like, yeah. And there are people that win the lottery, and there are people that, win money at roulette, et cetera. But it doesn't mean it's a good idea to put your money into that stuff.
That's great. Well, let's talk about that. Like, as someone who is a beginning, sort of budding entrepreneur, or someone who just wants to, begin to work on their path toward financial independence, I would say. What do you think, what would your advice be to somebody just kind of starting out that wanted to learn about investing and how to do it?
I think the best thing to do would be to open up one of these like Betterment sort of accounts where you can just contribute on a weekly basis to a broad base of low cost ETFs that will track lots of different things. And that's a great way to start building that nest egg, because if you can compound your money at 6% a year for 30 or 40 years, every dollar that you save is going to be like $15 when you retire, which is pretty crazy. And if you do well, it can be even higher than that. I think if you really want to go down the path of understanding investments, there's an amazing book called Margin of Safety. And it's kind of a unique story. This guy, Seth Klarman, wrote it when he was like 31 in like 1991. And it printed 5,000 copies and nobody bought it. So they've never printed another copy. However, Seth Klarman has gone on to be one of the most successful hedge fund investors of all time. And he's a billionaire many times over. And so that book, if you want to buy that book, it's like $5,000 on eBay. However, there's a lot of PDFs of it floating around the internet. And so you can get your hands on a free PDF and you can read that book. And if you internalize those lessons, even though he wrote it in 1991, there's still a lot of things that are very, very true about how to think about value and this margin of safety in an investment that will decrease your risk. And that's a great way to build your knowledge. And if you want to take it a step further, I reached out to Seth Klarman after I read that book, and I was like, hey, I really, I got a free version of your book. Like, I'm not going to lie, like I didn't pay for it. I read it, I really liked it. And he actually did a call with me, and we just talked about like that. We talked about like life philosophies and like all this other stuff. It was really cool. And so, there's another really good book called The Little Book That Beats the Market by this guy. I think his name is Joel Greenblatt. And it's like you could read this book in an hour, and it's not $5,000. I think, you get it on Amazon, and it lays out a really simple investment strategy that is really powerful, which is to basically look for businesses where they can take $1 and make it into a 25-cent annuity forever. So if you think about maybe like Coca-Cola, they can take $1 and they can use that dollar to like buy an ad in Ghana, and they can get a customer. And once you start drinking Coke, like you kind of drink it habitually for a really long time. You're in Atlanta, so you know about Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is like, this is one of Warren Buffett's best investments of all time was Coca-Cola, because they could take, $100 million or $1 billion. They could buy tons of advertising. They could get customers that every single day would give them a dime of profit. And those sorts of businesses, and when you say it out loud, it sounds kind of simple, but those are the sorts of businesses that are just unbelievable, and compound over long periods of time.
And that's cool. Yeah. So I remember there's another book in the 90s that I read that I really liked, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Was that,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that was kind of groundbreaking, like as far as like just seeing the world in a different way. But
What
I'm
were your
really,
takeaways?
well, big takeaway, don't work for time for money. Number one,
Yeah.
what the difference is between an investment and a liability was a huge takeaway, because a lot of people don't even know what that is. They don't know the difference between an investment and a liability, that a car is a liability. It's something you're going to have to take care of. You're going to have to spend and pour more money in. And as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's worth less, whereas like your when you bought in even for $1,000 in that New York piece of property, like that's an investment. That's something that you can use to grow, your net worth and expand from there, which is really a simple idea, but it is very often overlooked. I mean, even just because like in that book, like his dad, his actual father is kind of the poor dad, and his rich dad's the mentor, and the mentor didn't go to college. The mentor, he did all these things kind of off the grid or out of sort of the agreed upon kind of way. He was a bit of a maverick, I guess, in that sense. So it was interesting and refreshing because he just brought a new approach to what money is and how to make it. That he sold a few books too, but I'm really excited to check these out, man. Thank you so much for these tips. So let's talk about like your path. So, you have done a lot of this. You've learned a lot. You've come through and studied at a fine school and come out and let's talk about like kind of how you got to where you are, now. Let's talk about after, you and your brother have kind of done what you've done and learned a little bit about business and how you started to get into the niche that you are in now.
Yeah, sure. And I think, there's many different versions of this sort of story, right? There's like I was at a Red Sox game last night. A friend of ours works for a fancy law firm. And so we're in this like box with lots of other fancy people. And when they say, hey, what do you do? There's like a 30-second version that sounds really sweet. That's like, oh, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And then I think there's sort of like the real version, which is like, I got laid off from my first job, and my first business failed. I've probably had, I don't know, 20 or 30 sort of unsuccessful ventures in one form or another. And I think the sort of like fabric of it all is that I've always tried to pursue things that sort of interest me and are exciting. And I've been super lucky that a lot of those interests that are sort of inherent in my nature are also aligned economically in our society, and so have allowed me to accomplish stuff and that allows me to live in a nice city and all that jazz. I mean, I guess my path has been, I studied finance at NYU, loved finance, worked for an investment bank in 2008 right out of college, lost my job, sort of a punch in the face for 23-year-olds to lose their job 1 year out of college after working really a miserable job that you're working 100+ hour weeks. There's many times you're not leaving the office for 2 or 3 days in a row. You're not sleeping for 40+ hour stretches under extremely high intensity. And I think a lot of that stuff kind of led me down the path of like discovering meditation and thinking more hard about, what do I actually want to do? And I sort of always have this itch in the back of my head to start a business. And so I finally kind of had the guts when I was doing my MBA program to work on something that became a business that wasn't really that successful, to be quite honest with you. And then start my second business, which has been a lot more successful, which is essentially a place for companies to figure out what HR software to buy, which is as boring as it sounds. And I always recommend, like, if you've got insomnia, like, you totally check out our website. And you know, read like 10% of one article and you'll be out like a light. But you know, like we do this thing that's really hard, which is like navigating a huge landscape of payroll software, you know, everything from artificial intelligence to hire diversity goals down to like, how do you pay people? And helping companies navigate that through free research that we monetize through advertisements. Cool. So anyway, that's sort of a rambling answer to what you asked.
No, that's great. No, I loved that answer. I thought it was awesome. And, you know, we all have, so there's so many aspects of business. I mean, like I've got to do my taxes again. You know, and it's like, I don't want to do that. There's so many, I want to have resources, and I can imagine you guys are amazing for that. You know, I also want to think a little bit about, you know, your first business and not being so successful. I think there's so much gold there. You know, me and my mom have sold pizzas at times, you know, like, but that led to another thing, you know, just quick story. We were in Panama City where they do spring break, and we were like, oh, we'll sell pizzas to the kids. Right. So we go buy $100 worth of pizza or whatever. Nobody wants pizza. You know, they're like, no, dude, I'm good, but can I get a ride to the other side of the beach? And so we stumbled upon the need, the demand for people who didn't realize how long the beach was. So they didn't want to, they start walking and they would be like, oh my God, we're not there yet. So we would just, you know, zip them. This is before Uber. And so we'd zip them up and back between the beach, and then wound up the next day printing up cards with their phone number on there. And then just, you know, being like a black market taxi. Fuber is what we called it. You know, and that kind of led to that, but it was through failure, frankly, that we were able to find success. And I would love to think about that a little bit, like maybe some of the lessons that you've taken over the course of your career that have led you to, you know, to success.
Yeah. I mean, I think our entrepreneurship in general is a lot of failure. It's almost like the visual that I get is you're in a hockey arena and you're at half ranked, I don't know, half court, whatever, you're halfway through, and you got to shoot the puck into the net, and there's like a goalie there. And so like, and somebody's like punching you every like 7 you know? And so like, you might get your first puck in, and some people do, they just hit a slap shot and it goes in somehow. And they're like, oh, that was pretty easy. But more times than not, like you shoot, you miss, you shoot, it gets blocked, you shoot, you miss again, etc. And meanwhile, you know, somebody's punching you in the kidneys every single time that you shoot. And so you got to keep taking the punches so that you can eventually shoot one that goes in. And eventually you will, if you're able to take, you know, that many punches. And that's sort of how I view these things, because if I think about, you know, the business I'm in now, we've probably had like 17 or more iterations of this business. And it's just that I got really good at doing them really fast and really cheap. And so I've got so many domain names that I own, so many, you know, forms that I use to fake software and all these other things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember that one. But you just get good at, okay, how do you create a MVP, minimum viable product? How do you test it? What are the core hypotheses? What does success look like? What does failure look like? Oh, this is a failure? Okay, why is that? Okay, let's move on, let's iterate. And so if you get good at that, you're gonna be successful. And it doesn't matter if you're in the pizza business. That's exactly what you guys did, right? Like you went up to people and they're like, nope, I don't want pizza. And you weren't like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put some pepperoni on it. You said, well, why not? And what do you want? And then you changed and then you created something that you were able to make some money off of. And that's what it's all about. I think the kind of core lesson there that's kind of interesting is that you guys were doing something that is very similar to what people pay for already, which is get a cab. That's what Uber's doing, right? They're not doing anything really revolutionary. They're just doing something that you already do and making it better.
Yes.
By knowing when the cab's going to get there, by maybe making it cheaper, by having this rating system, etc., by scheduling things versus like in Boston, like you got to call a cab company and like somebody with a hard Boston accent's like, what the hell do you want? You know, like, it's like, I want to be a customer. Is that okay? They're like, maybe we'll send you somebody in the next 20 minutes. So I think, the most successful businesses, almost without exception, are just doing something that you're already doing and making it better. They're not doing something totally de novo. They're finding a niche, and the niche can be like, people that have weird shaped faces, and like for COVID, like they needed a mask that was wider or something, right? It's like something that's like a broad market, and it's like, oh, I don't know, there's a big 3M has like a huge mask business, but like they're not serving like this 1% of the population well. And that 1%, if we create a business there, that's like a $5 million business. Like those are the people that are the most successful versus like, I'm going to create something that's different from a mask. And like, this whole big creative thing, and your brain's full of dopamine because you're like, oh, new idea. Right. And you just like go down the path that's like going to change people's behavior, and it's going to fail.
No, that's exactly right. Well, we did pretty well with Airbnb too, especially when it first came out. Obviously last year was a little bit weird, but that the same story there with them, it's the same idea as like Uber versus a taxi. It's like, well, do you want to, especially now though? I mean, I would choose Airbnb now over a hotel, because I've stayed in a few hotels and they don't even like change your sheets now or anything, but there's the health club's not open, like the pool's closed and all that. But, just by offering, basically the same thing, a place to stay, but then you can differentiate it. You could make it a little bit more inexpensive for people. They could stay in your extra room, or you could make it, real fancy and bougie and put out drinks and make it a whole experience or an event, So there's, just to your point, you're exactly right. It's bringing something that's already there, but making it better, differentiating it slightly, which is cool. And it seems like you've really kind of put together a heck of a process to kind of go through and refine whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, can I pitch you an Airbnb business idea?
I would love to hear it. Sure.
Okay. So I think it would be really phenomenal if somebody created an Airbnb / haunted house experience.
Okay.
So like, imagine like you get an Airbnb and like you sign a waiver, right? Like you're all in on this thing, and you don't know exactly like what's going to happen, but like there's like a haunted house element to this thing. And there's so many different iterations of like what you could do to mess with people, but like, noises in the walls, the power goes out, you're in the middle of the woods. Maybe you get one of the people to buy into something and they go missing, and you're like, you can't find this person. Yes. And like there's just a million different things you could do to really mess with people. And then if you're the person booking it, like you don't have to tell your friends this is a haunted Airbnb, and they could just be like there's a guy outside with an axe. Like, what do we do? So anyway, I think that would be like a really fun thing for somebody should do that. Somebody
I love that. That's hilarious. Yeah. That'd be so fun. It's like an Airbnb escape room, like
exactly. Good. That's part of it. Right. Exactly. There's like clues like, hey, your friend Mark, like we kidnapped that guy, like forget about him. Like, here's how you find him, like there's this whole thing. Obviously you'd have to pay a lot extra for this experience, but I think it'd be pretty cool.
I think so too. And again, I mean, the niches, right? Or they say where the riches are. So by tailoring that expense or experience to somebody, maybe the true crime family, like, people who are into that kind of stuff, and be like, hey, and the season is coming up. That's a great idea, Phil. I love it.
Yeah. And it's viral, right? Like you're not going to have to market that thing. Like people are going to tell their friends, or like the local news is going to be like, hey, like there's this creep out in the middle of the woods who's got this Airbnb, and it's like half escaped the room, and like the reviews are ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where, like you take the 1-star review that's like, this is crazy, I was so scared, blah, 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 and like that's your advertisement.
Yes. That is brilliant. I love it. Yeah, if you added a video element to capturing some of that stuff, I think it could be really fun as like a trailer or something. I have a friend who does like really.
That's great. That's a great idea. That's honestly a great idea. Yeah. You could do like those locks, like the automated locks, and like people are locked in the house, and you've got them on camera.
And because you could put cameras all through, little tiny what do they call? They're like babysitter cameras or whatever, or like
Exactly, the nanny cams.
Yeah.
They're like $20.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So here's the crazy thing though, like, right. So like, it's a lot of fun to like brainstorm. You're coming up with ideas. They sound like great ideas. Like our brains are just like full of like dopamine. Like this is so much fun. This could be a good idea. This could be an awful idea.
Right.
Like you might get sued,
Sure.
like maybe nobody else wants to do this thing, or maybe, you're the next billionaire on Shark Tank, right? You franchise this thing and you figure out a lot of things. And so it's really like the next phase is like, what's the MVP for this thing? Like, how do we test this? And what's like the core hypothesis and like the secondary hypothesis that we can test and we can figure out, are people going to pay? Because it's going to cost us a lot of money to like,
right.
Facilitate this thing. So we got to be able to charge double the Airbnb rate, right? In our locality. And, this thing, so that we just don't go down this like tangent of like this new thing that like really is a new thing. It's kind of like what people are doing with Escape the Room. It's kind of what people are doing with Airbnb. And so that's sort of the thing that is incumbent upon the entrepreneur to figure out, like, how do I do this so I don't like waste, 20 grand,
right.
Or like a year of my life.
Absolutely. And what's helped me with that, and this is what I recently learned from launching a course, was that the best way to do it is to pre-sell it and build it in real time. So if it were possible and we could find that perfect sort of target person that was interested in the thing before we, put all those wheels and spokes into place, and hired the clown or whatever. Clowns scare the crap out of me, dude. If it was a clown, I'd freak.
Oh yeah.
But
could you imagine the doors are locked, the lights go out, and then there's like a clown that comes out of like the basement door. You know what I mean? It just like grabs you and like takes your friend down to the basement or something.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would be unreal. That's brilliant. Such a fun idea. But to test it, I think you could, test it and have somebody basically, if you find the right person, right? So fortunately, with a course, it's like I already have people who might potentially be interested. I book some calls with them. I talk them up. But I mean, I guess the same thing is technically true with this. I could just launch out a post in Nextdoor, and be like, "Hey, who's interested in an interactive haunted house this holiday season?" And then just start filtering through people and seeing what potential. Because I think that's fun too. I actually really like involving the customer in the experience themselves and directly asking. That's what's so great about, I think, the technology that we have now, is that it's so easy to just ask, like, what do you guys think? You can just put a Facebook post or a LinkedIn, kind of question, like what, this or that, and kind of gauge people's interest and use them kind of like a focus group a little bit.
Yeah, totally. For sure.
Can you talk a little bit about MVP and what that is?
Yeah, minimum viable product. There's a great book called The Lean Startup. And essentially, for example, this crazy Airbnb thing, like, I probably wouldn't like buy a house and renovate it for this and like hire a lawyer to like write up a 600-page thing and like, put like 200 grand into this idea. I would probably like, do some like very lightweight version of this myself and not even hire other people to do any of it. I would do it myself, and I would, call up a local news station and say, "Hey, we're doing this crazy thing. Isn't that newsworthy?" And get a couple customers or not. Maybe nobody signs up for it, and it's like, "Oh, okay, this was a bad idea, but I spent no money and 10 hours of my life on it, so who cares?" And just sort of do it in the most lightweight way possible. I think a lot of times, especially with technology, people are like, I got to hire a software engineer, and there's this huge vision in my head, and we got to like whiteboard it and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you really don't. Like, you could solve everything you're doing with Airtable and just have like a dynamic form, to figure out, are people going to use this or not? And if so, oh, okay, then we can build the software out. But we've now learned a lot, and we've saved ourselves a lot of money. And more times than not, unfortunately, you're going to fail, and that's a big part of entrepreneurship. I just had a guy email me right before this call, and it was basically a I failed email. And that's okay. Like, that's part of the journey. You learn a lot from those things. Eventually, you're going to get the puck in the net or whatever. And it sucks to get punched again. But it's going to work out. And when it does, it's going to feel that much better because you went through the hardship. So.
Man, that's great. I love that. And there was a book that I read. I've seen the lean. I have the Lean Startup, and I've never read it, which is terrible. But one book that I love is called Profit First. I love that book, and that's kind of like the angle that I've tried to have, because I think it's just in our nature as Americans that we think if we buy something, it solves a problem. That's just like, growing up and consumerism, whatever. And it's just like, I feel that way. Like, I know I'm like, oh, if I buy this course, like, it is just going to magically impart the knowledge. But like, but if I have a big vision, of course I want to see, all this stuff over here. But like you're saying, you sink $200,000 into something, and then it's a failure, and now you're out. But you don't have to do it that way. You can. And I want to encourage people to try their own idea out. I mean, even if that's a post, on social media, like, who would be interested in X, Y, or Z? And people will comment. If you get 10 or 20 comments, then you can talk those people up and just ask them what they think about it. Get on a call, maybe potentially, and brainstorm with them. It's very, very simple and straightforward. I just love that. I think that's such good, sound advice, because it's just so easy to want to spend money to solve a problem. It just seems very, I don't know, just very, intuitive to I think our culture.
I think it's a form of procrastination. So if you look at, like, why do people procrastinate, it's to put off something that they're afraid of. Almost always. And so for an entrepreneur, you're afraid of failure, and by drafting a legal agreement, by building software, by renovating your house, etc., you're putting off the point where you can fail, because all it takes is time and money to renovate a house, and you feel like you're making progress, but you're actually not. And so that's a really good way to keep your ego intact. I've been rereading How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is like the greatest book ever written about human behavior. But and we're all like, we're trying to build our egos, right? Like, that's how we live. And that could be by having strong opinions about something you know nothing about. Or it could be by thinking, I'm this great entrepreneur and I'm building this multi-billion-dollar company. And the way you keep that dream alive is by never doing the one thing you should do, which is like talk to customers. And so it's just a form of procrastination.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that is one of the best books ever written, really. Like, the self-help, it doesn't get much better than that. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's such a great book. Any other books you want to maybe throw out? Because now my audience will be familiar with that book. They'd be familiar with, Neville Goddard. They'd be familiar with Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, and many of the sort of self-help types that are pretty well known. But as far as other books that maybe might be helpful to folks, anything come to mind?
Sure. A book I always love is The Snowball, about Warren Buffett. It is amazing how entrepreneurial he was, even as like a 7-year-old. And it also gets into like him as like a person, like, he wasn't a great father, had this like other relationship, basically had 2 wives, etc. So that's a really interesting one. I think a lot of the Michael Lewis books are interesting because he's a great storyteller, and it'll give you some insights into different things that are historical, like The Big Short, how people kind of think about different opportunities, Moneyball, etc. There's a book called Founder Stories by Jessica Livingston. Her and her husband founded Y Combinator, which is like the biggest accelerator of startups in the world. Companies like Airbnb or Dropbox or Stripe or Reddit all came out of Y Combinator. And she just interviews people, like the guy that founded Hotmail or whatever, about what was it like in the early days? Like, how did you know you had something, et cetera? And so that's just like a really good anthology, and you can read a chapter when you're sitting on the subway or something like that. So
That's great.
yeah.
I love books like that. One of my favorite books is How to Poke a Dead Frog. It's like just a interviews comedians and about jokes that they've told and different things like that. It's a really fun book.
That's cool.
But
I just watched a really good interview from 2012. It was on HBO called Talking Funny.
Oh yeah.
With Ricky Gervais and Chris Rock, Louis C.K. and Jerry Seinfeld. And like, it's really interesting because they talk a lot about sort of the art of comedy and the business of comedy. Why do people come to your shows? How do you suck them in? The relationship between the comedian and the audience, like all these things that are sort of like next level that you don't consciously realize that the best comics in the world, of course, are thinking about this, just like the best artists, the best actors, etc. Like you're just sort of admiring them for the present, but there's a lot of stuff that goes behind the scenes, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh man, I love that special. It's really, really cool. They get very honest, and yeah, and yeah, I mean, comics that's a big industry. If you get to the point where you can, get people in seats, then you can make quite a bit of money, and it's one of those things too, where like Tim Dillon, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a New York guy. I think he's in LA, but he's smaller. He's not like on that level, but he's doing quite well. I think he was the number one on Patreon, the most subscribed. He's not anymore. I think Andrew Schultz, actually, who's another comedian, bumped him. And Andrew Schultz has a special on Netflix now, after years of trying to get a special and trying to get a special and trying to get a special. And he's very funny. But he was too edgy, I think. And so they were like, nah, we're not giving it to Schultz. So what he did was he said, you know what? I'm just going to make my own special and I'll put it on the internet. So he took his special and he took it in, I think, 15-minute segments. So he did what was being done better by taking 15-minute segments and putting that on YouTube. And what he found was that people wouldn't watch a whole hour special of a comedian they've never heard of, even though they were on Netflix, but they would totally watch 15 minutes of a guy they didn't know who he was, especially, with all those comments and the amount of views and so on. And so that kind of catapulted him into success. And he's, over 1 million subscribers on YouTube now, and is doing very, very well. He's got a special on Netflix. I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called. I need to watch it. I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, another great example of that. And yeah, the comedy business is very much a business.
It is. Everything is, like I was talking about hanging out with these lawyers last night, and like, and maybe it's obvious that like being a law firm is a business, right? But like for the most part, like they're like, I need to do this contract, I need to do this deposition, and they don't think about like business development and building their brand and content marketing and how do you get introduced to new clients, et cetera. It's very much like, I went to law school with this person, and therefore like 10 years from now, when they've got a big job, they'll be my client. However, I think the best lawyers, just like the best comedians, the best actors, the best anything, they're thinking about it like a business. Like Banksy, like I'm sure that guy is thinking about it like a business. And maybe he's not, maybe he's like the truly rare exception, but he's got a heck of a PR machine. Like he's done a phenomenal job of building a brand and creating value from his artwork. That's probably intentional.
Yeah, I think so too. Absolutely. I mean, it just takes a lot of thought, as I know, like in going through these processes and testing things and creatively trying to problem solve. And like, it's really cool that you've been able to kind of put a process together that you can kind of go through, which is amazing. But that's happened with a lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of failure, a lot of adjustments and all those types of things. So it's really cool, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me and the folks listening to the podcast today.
Of course. Yeah. Maybe that'll be the title of my book, 30 Failures and 1 Success.
Hey man, I saw a book on the shelf that was called Fail Forward Fast.
I thought of that. That's a great mentality for entrepreneurs, for sure. And for anybody, right? Like you're trying to get good at anything, whether it's chess or soccer or business, like that's what you got to do.
That's right. Yeah. You got to get out there and try and figure it out as you do it, as opposed to trying, I think a lot of people, like you said, procrastination stemming from fear. I'm afraid this will fail. So I don't want to get out there and test it. I want to whiteboard and think about all these different things and how much money we can spend, because that's definitely going to solve my problem. But no, in fact, if we can just get out there, start testing, and figure it out as we go, eventually, I think we'll learn to swim by being in the drink,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, hey, if folks want to follow you, I know you're on LinkedIn. Are you anywhere else social media wise? People can kind of check out your stuff.
Yeah, I have a blog that I actually pretty rarely add to, but it's philstrazzulla.com. I actually started it when I got laid off to try to help myself get a new job. But it's a lot of stuff I just write about, like, here's something I learned, etc. And so that, that's cool. But if you want to, reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever, or check out selectsoftwarereviews.com if you want to, again, cure your insomnia or figure out what to buy.
Man, you are serving the needs of people who don't want to do that sort of boring stuff, right? Like the tediousness. Exactly. And so you're killing it, which is great. And thank you for doing it. I know there's a lot of people who are very happy about that. So yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes, and I'll send you some information regarding transurfing. I know you had mentioned you wanted to. I think it's a great book, and it kind of touches on a lot of in a lot of areas, metaphysically, I guess, but a lot of the self-help stuff and even business stuff. What he talks about in that book, one of the concepts is outer intention, which is the same as like the invisible hand of the market. It just is applied to other things other than finances. So I'll sling a link your way for an audio book, and then if you decide you want to hold it and read it, because it's kind of thick, but even just the first like chapter or two, pretty insightful. The idea of pendulums is really neat, and that's chapter 2. So I'll shoot that your way. But dude, thank you so much for taking the time with me today.
Yeah, thank you.